Welcome, everyone. I'm Brianne Chavez. I'm the Executive Director of the Washington State Nursery and Landscape Association. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, The Nitty-Gritty Production Practices for Growers of Woody Ornamentals. This webinar is proudly funded by the WSDA Specialty Block Grant and is part of a three-part series designed specifically for growers and wholesale nurseries. During this session, we will explore practical strategies to support your growing operation. And today, our subject matter expert is Allison Coots, President of Sound Horticulture. Allison comes from a background of greenhouse management, first building, then operating a wholesale specialty plant nursery in Bellingham in the early 80s. After 20 years of research in beneficial insect use, compost tea brewing, designing soil blends and other green growing methods, she began Sound Horticulture in 2000. Her passion for holistic cultivation fuels and encourages her company's broad aspirations, bringing biological solutions from years of experience to large-scale crop management, greenhouse ornamentals, hydroponics, and more. So Allison, I will let you take them away.
All right. Thank you, Brianne. It's such an honor, and it's wonderful to work with the WSNLA, and thank you for this, and also for hosting this whole series. So it is amazing what the organization is doing, and I'm just really glad there's a little funding here and there to help cover for some of this, because it's an exciting time in horticulture. There's just so much change, and we're going to focus this short I'll try to keep it fairly short presentation on a little bit more angled to the perspective of the woody ornamental producers. So, you guys are such an important part of this, larger market. I think the people selling all the conventional chemistries are they're well aware of that, and that's why there's so many pesticides that are available and registered for ornamental production. It's not even close to what's registered, though, for agriculture, for outdoor production. So greenhouse production labels are quite a bit different. Things are changing quickly. Many of the materials that you might have been accustomed to using for many years may or may not be available that much longer. So this is a really important time to start thinking about what else you might want to use. And that it doesn't matter whether you're a bare root producer, you're, liner folks, or you're doing, finished large containers. The farther you're shipping, the larger the truckloads, the more regulations we're all facing. And so I'm just hoping that in this short presentation, we can really uncover some of the more ecological choices that might be more sound options for you, and inspire you to look at trying some things a little bit differently in the coming season. So this is a great opportunity to do just that. You'll never see me totally knock pesticides because we still need them. Pesticides do still have a place. What's happening now is they're just, finding their place is becoming a little harder, and it's more complicated because you don't need them in the same way that you used to. And that includes even the fungicides. So the choices of the softer conventional chemistries have just really expanded greatly. But to truly evaluate those carefully before choosing to use them is important, because while there are ratings online, and you can go to these websites like the BioBest app for looking at AIs or active ingredients and looking at how they might impact, say, for instance, beneficial insects that have maybe just wandered into your operation, whether those are bees or hoverflies. You really want to look at potentially the impacts on, your natives, and then especially if you're actually introducing beneficial insects. So you really may need some help, because the chemistries are changing so quick, and the classifications of the chemistries that are legit in our industry have expanded, and there's many that are very, very similar that are in the same classifications. And you want to be careful, even if you're looking at pesticide rotations. You may not be rotating when you think you might be rotating. So again, the biological and chemical compatibility charts are very good. Copert has one. There's more and more databases coming online where you just plug in like your AI or the trade label, and hopefully that cross-references and shows you like, oh, I'm gonna apply Aureus for thrips control. The adult is gonna survive if I spray X, but what about the nymphs or, those eggs that have been laid? So looking at the impacts and the side effects, both mortality, percentage of mortality to your beneficial insects, but also looking at sublethal effects. And that is something that is not discussed widely enough. So another topic for another day. There's a lot of science coming out on just like what is the impact if you you're hammering on your pests, you hit some beneficials, and they're stunned or set back or impacted in what ways. And so that would, of course, be determined by what it is that you are, what you have just applied. I want to say, though, that the most critical gap I think I see in greenhouses when I do walkthroughs with growers is that so often there's just this massive gaposis between the IPM, the pest manager, um, the folks kind of that have the backpack sprayer on, um, and just middle and upper management, keeping track of who's doing what where and making sure that the spraying is not just like this old school, we're just gonna hammer everything in this range. It's like, wait a minute. So communication is just imperative, especially because folks that have been spraying for a long time have ingrained habits and ingrained ways of how they like to do things. So I know that's hard for some of you. So anyway, we've just got to work on what that's going to take to educate our staff. This is a funny picture. This is Russ, who was working there at Blooming Nursery in Oregon for so long. He's hauling in his fogger, and this is just an example. Like here he's hauling in his dram fogger. He's got a beautiful piece of equipment. It's like, okay, so we've got a cold fogger now. What can we run through there? We can actually run microbiological tools. We can do myco pesticides through this machine, as well as other things that might be biostimulants. So looking at new ways to use our equipment is really kind of critical. My slide sorter is not moving. There we go. So it really, you guys are so varied out there. You may be out there watching the leaves drop on your magnolia gallons. So this is that time of year where, you have this opportunity to really think through what you want to do next. What's sitting there in that leaf debris is one question. How am I going to clean that up? Can I actually shop back through there? What am I wintering over, and how can I minimize the carryover of pests from year to year? And in some cases, are my thresholds for pest tolerance lower in these crops because I'm shipping whatever X and Y bare root and or bare naked, and nobody's really going to care until it sprouts in the spring. So lots of considerations about how intense you need to handle these crops. So much of this is determined by how cool you're running those crops. So it just takes a lot of planning and deciding what your actions are going to be before you have to take them. One thing that is changing so quick, and I'm just going to put a little energy into this because I know that many of you are really thinking about that, and that is the fact that, our substrates are changing rapidly. So with the price going through the roof on peat moss and all the other alternatives like wood fiber and cocoa core, are being looked at, raw wood, different composted barks and materials that all have actually like a lot of good points and then some difficult aspects to them. So some of the challenges are going to be like, what are you going to do? Because it starts with the soil on up. And that's, peat has been favored for many years because it's been, consistent, reliable, basically fairly sterile, not hosting a wide, like problematic issue with, say, pathogens, which can now be a concern with these newer mediums or newer components if you're having to kind of blend again. So some of the problems that we have in crop culture now are really going back to the blends and some of us being kind of forced into moving pretty quickly into these new blends and mediums. So I know that you're thinking about aeration, drainage, water storage, holding capacity, and then how differing many of these materials are going to be from a nutrient uptake position. So maybe you're having to make some of these changes. I threw just a comment here on biological, like biochar. So many of you have heard of biochar and might think it's a little like woo-woo, but what it basically adds to these mediums is an amazing capacity for aeration and porosity. The capacity of biochar, these really fine particles, to actually house beneficial organisms, microbes, is really amazing. So it can actually be a really high carbon rich soil amendment. So if you're having to fiddle or you're having an opportunity to kind of build some new blends, take some time to actually really experiment and look at some of our suppliers in Washington and Oregon and around, to kind of procure some of these more regional and new materials that are being produced in our area. So the better you do with your potting medium, the better you're going to do all told. So, I mentioned the challenges with the peat alternatives, and this is changing fast. I've seen some some blends lately where there are so many fines in the chunky wood chips that people are using that for a longer term, like a woody perennial crop, over time, you're going to have a whole bunch of settling. And if those fines are all going to the bottom and you have like compaction of that medium, you're going to have issues also with getting the water to where you want to go. So, anyway, I've got more to say on that, but it really concerns me because the level of pathogens and disease showing up in crops lately is not really what I'm happy seeing at all. So sub-irrigation and flood floor irrigation can be a real issue. So I'm going to spend just a minute and talk to you about some of these issues, because I was just last week, just really, really stoked to see a system come online. Actually, that was down at Blooming. I was back at Blooming, and they just purchased a couple of these massive pieces of equipment to basically aerate, hyper aerate with nanotechnology, the irrigation water. It's amazing. So, if you could imagine a situation, somebody's nursery anywhere where they have like a flood floor situation, and that's always been just like that's the way we do it, and it's hard to make those changes, but things get uneven over time, or a gallon container just sits wet for too long. um, Once you have disease pressure starting, everything else just goes to hell in a handbag. So that's why I just wanted to spend a couple minutes talking about this. So this new technology is amazing for anybody who's like circulating water. It could be aquaculture or cleaning apples. But this nanotechnology for, say, hydroponics and for sub irrigation, or for just recycling water back into a system, which is what we're all looking at anyway. It can be great. Like right now, most systems are using like chlorine dioxide. Um, there's other technologies available, and some of them are really good. But I think this is something that's worth looking at because the size of these bubbles are so small that it brings the oxygenation level of the dissolved oxygen up over like over 100%. The nano bubbles are so small. They're even smaller than like like, well, like a human hair is, say, 0.2 millimeters. These are 200 nanometers, less than that. So 2,500 times smaller than a grain of salt. So these actually do form naturally in nature, like when you are hiking in the woods and you see a beautiful waterfall, when that water hits, those nano bubbles, tiny bubbles, do form naturally. But this can go such a long ways to aerate water and in wastewater treatment to actually kill pathogens, because high levels of oxygenation don't allow for pathogens or anaerobic organisms to proliferate. So this is something I've been super curious about for a long time with like the compost teas. But we're in a whole new era here. So, vigorous roots equals healthy crops, and anything we can do to increase the disease resistance is actually going to help keep that plant from signaling that it also needs help with pests. So pest resistance will be naturally improved. So I've got a pest for you. I don't know about you, but this one's driving me crazy. And these are the leaf hoppers. Leaf hoppers over the last 20 years have been ratcheting up and becoming like a major problem. I was an herb grower for 40 years and still am, kind of returning to my roots. Plants of the Labiatae family, and that includes like the sages and the rosemaries and the catnip and all of our friends in that mint family. They're all very vulnerable, and many of them are woody plants, like the sages and the rosemaries and even the thymes. So I want to mention this because there's other types of leaf hoppers too, but they tend to go crazy over these crops. And yep, there's stuff you can spray, or we can just really look at our good growing practices. Maybe we can keep them out of the greenhouse by screening. Um, but there is this influx of them every summer, and they love the warmer weather. When grasses and things in the fields like start to dry down, they're just looking for like something fresh and juicy. This is a big problem in ag on the east side, in different crop systems, because leafhoppers also vector a lot of diseases and viruses. So you can imagine these things that come largely from Europe, some of the ones that are attacking us in our trade. This is just a few weeks ago up in Canada, these little rosemary Christmas trees. And it's like, oh man, you guys are going to have to spray the heck out of these unless you're using BioControl. Um, in this case, I don't remember if this grower was. It is amazing though, you get up into Canada and 99% of the nurseries are using biological control and 70 to 90% of their operations. But they are also largely a lot of really large nurseries that have a lot of screening and a lot of control. So, it works in most places, and they're spending a little bit of money doing it, but they're also integrating a lot of other sprays that are microbial. So I want to kind of talk about some of those combinations there. Tolerance in these crop systems is zero, like nil, to very, very, very low. You're going to have customer complaints if they see anything. So our job is to send it out clean. So here's what the leaf hoppers look like. And almost every day now, people like, well, this summer and on through August and September, people are texting me pictures, and largely these little nymphs. What is this? What is this? It's a leaf hopper nymph. So the most common ones here are like the sage leaf hopper and the Ligurian one, both from the Mediterranean, but now both widely established in the northern US. So probably more the sage leafhopper up our way, and that's the one that's hitting like our woody plants. Anyway, I want you to be aware of what they look like and see the different nymphal stages. They overwinter in leaf debris and in the surrounds, and then they can migrate in waves. So you can see what the spotting looks like, the damage. Thankfully, these are insects that do have a lot of natural biological controls like out there in nature. I'm just afraid that they've kind of reached such a peak, and um, a lot of what we're doing out there in our environment is really having an impact on the amount and the volume, the density of just naturally occurring insects, just how we're losing birds. The birds are feeding on insects, and we have less and less of nature helping us. So our job is to get it in there and figure out, like, as growers, what do we need to do that's going to actually make the most sense for, say, for instance, this pest. So I mentioned screening, trapping with yellow sticky cards, monitoring that movement and monitoring that influx and being prepared for those repeated waves as they move into a system, if they are going to sneak into your operation. Yes, you can spray with things like soaps and neem, and pyrethrins work pretty well, but you get into those sprays and you're going to really have an impact on, like, the beneficials that you may have released earlier on. So I'm more of the camp that let's release some biocontrol early in these systems, try to get them established, try to minimize the sprays, and then that way when we do see on yellow sticky cards or traps or movement or influx in, that hopefully all we have to do, if anything, is just hit the edge. And maybe that's with a spray of like a microbial, a myco pesticide. One that I like we're looking at right now is Velifer, because of the oil dispersion. It's a Beauveria bassiana. So I think if you play your cards right on the front end with the beneficials, in this case, very little intervention besides that will be needed. One wild thing I want to show you first is one of my favorite newcomers to the biological supply chain, I guess, if you will, and that is, it's called a crazy mite, and it's Anistis bacarum, and it's a huge mite. It's so much easier to see, but they are crazy. They're also called whirligig mites, and they're very erratic and they bounce around, and leafhoppers are actually, I think, one of their favorite prey, as well as whitefly. So they seem to have a propensity for things that move quickly. And so they like the chase, they like the hunt. And we've got them all around us, like they're in the cedar tree outside here. And they'll pop down in the summer and look for other things to eat. But now we have, a producer in the US side. However, it's not legal for us to ship into all states yet. So that whole authorization through APHIS to ship insects around the globe is highly monitored. These things need to be proven as, native, which they are across the US, but safe to disperse as biological agents, basically. But they have a long lifespan. They propagate readily. They race around to where they're needed. So if you release them in one crop system and they get done doing their thing, you're going to find them in the next system, the next crop over, going after thrips or mealybug, or something else moving around quickly. I almost think of them as the mite version of the hunter fly, which has been introduced into the area and waits for things to happen and then poop, 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 jumps and moves between crop systems as needed. So anyway, I think that you would like exploring that one a little bit. It's just an augmentation. I truly think that the baseline of the leafhopper program from a cost benefit standpoint is going to be starting the season proactively with releases of green lacewing eggs. So they're by far the least expensive thing, and you can even get them in like a bulk, like just straight eggs. And then you yourself, if you wanted to, if you had like an acre range of whatever rosemary Christmas trees, you could mix them into a blower and actually mix the eggs with rice hulls and blow them out. So lots of fun ways of applying these things. In some situations, people will release even the green lacewing adults, like say they're in a conservatory, like the one behind me, and you want something to fly up into the canopy of your, tree production, then you can have the green lacewings fly exactly to right where the problem might be, and then she just starts looking for the aphid pressure, for instance, or pest pressure, and start laying her eggs. And these are wild generalist predators. So lacewing larvae are incredibly voracious, and they eat a huge array of things from, leafhopper eggs to aphids galore, thrips, spider mites, whatever they can get a hold of, small caterpillars, whitefly adult and pupae. Anyway, they're really fabulous. So for the idea of price point and covering an area, the green lacewing eggs are a great way to start if you are concerned about this pest, especially like the leafhopper or early aphids and you want to be proactive. The one downside to the green lacewings is once they pupate, once they go from these crazy voracious larvae, once they pupate into their adult form, those mamas, she's ready to go lay eggs, but she's not at all interested in surviving on any little green bugs. She's only interested at that point in pollen and nectar. So you can entice them to hang out and stay about in your growing system by adding like some beneficial insect habitat, which we'll try to cover some of those. Another one I do want to mention that I'm just nuts about is a new offering, and it's called brown lacewing. So Micromus, like the green lacewing, there's probably about 60 species of each throughout North America. And the brown lacewing are native here. You see them in Western Washington, even more on the east side. The green lacewing you see everywhere, but they're nocturnal. So both of these types are nocturnal feeders. So you don't see a lot of them, but they're there. The brown lacewing are quite a bit smaller than the green lacewing. What I really like about them is they're good in these vertical systems, and they're very long lived. And they keep feeding on juicy little insects as adults. They don't have that same necessity to move to a pollen or nectar source. So they're actually probably a little easier in woody plant systems, especially if they're combined with other, say, aphid controls proactively. So pretty easy to get them established, and they're very, very good in cooler temperatures. So yeah, that's probably enough on that. So jumping over to application, like how are you going to get these out? I'm just going to show you my favorite of, there's a bunch of new, very cool little blowers that attach to other applicators that attach to a handheld blower. Some are freeform and have their own mechanism, but this one here is actually produced in Israel. And it's by a company called BioBee. And they've been working on their beta versions now for a while, and I think they finally really nailed it. So this baby pops on, just attaches to most easily to like a newer version of Makita. So you want to match up the right blower so that your attachment goes on, but your applicator can be used in a number of ways. And it actually has two adjustments for speed. So it's got a little rotator, which helps pull the carrier and your mite material or your green lacewing eggs down through the funnel or down into, from the hopper, whichever one you have, down through the rotator. And then you've got the speed at which you're moving the air. So you've got the speed of the rotation and the speed of the air. So depending on the carrier and what you're actually pushing out there into the system, and then how fast your grower wants to walk, you can really get cruising and cover an acre in just like, well, at walking speed. Just have to stop and reload. So these are really great for the predator mites and the green lacewing eggs, and are kind of like a game changer now when people used to say, well, I don't have time to go out and disperse things, but I can go spray chemicals. It's like, well, you can also just go out and apply critters. So they are my favorite critters. I love these green lacewings. So here's what we do in larger scale. Like this is actually potatoes in Eastern Washington, and we do about 500 to 1,000 acres a year. But we just buy the bulk green lacewing eggs, and then we mix them with PBH, the rice hulls. And let me know if you need a source. One of our growers here on the west side has like a whole bunch of PBH that they are like, we're done with this, we need to move it. But anyway, like sourcing and networking is so much fun because it's really cool to see what these other growers are doing. So the green lacewing are just hatching. Their eggs turn from bright green to kind of a dull browny gray, and then boop, the egg cracks open. You can even see their little eyeballs right before they hatch out of their egg. So right when they're ready, just about ready to hatch, is when we mix them. And then that would be the time, like same thing, you'd put them in the blower and get them out just before hatching. So nothing else happens to them. They don't get eaten by somebody else. It's like, ooh, yummy egg out there in the system. Anyway, the crop duster works great. You can also use drones. I think I'll show you a picture maybe of, yeah, of a drone coming up. Um, in this situation, the picture with the white sheet there, what that is that's the grower and I going out to the field right before the crop duster comes over, and then spreading a sheet and actually just checking to see like what the pattern is of the fall out of the airplane. So we do this every year. We've been doing this for like 11 years now, and it really has helped take the edge off. The grower himself now is not so pressed to, even though he's organic, he's still under pressure from those crop advisors, like, let's spray, let's spray. It's like, well, you just have a few potato aphid. They're just starting. You're at row closure. Let's do it. So we do 2 applications a year at about 15,000 an acre. So that gives you an idea of kind of rates and timing. So sometimes it's going to mean multiple application because you also have multiple influxes of pest. So there is a lot to think about, right? So you've got your, your goals of your team, and everybody's doing their very best job. So these are just some of the questions um, I try to ask every season with the growers and their team. Like, okay, so do you have everybody in all of your different areas? Are they informed enough that they feel like they can make observations and share those observations? And how then do they how do they report what they see? Do they have a really easy way of reporting? I'll give you some ideas. Um, and uh and is there a carryover of plant material? Like, is that going to be an issue? Are there weedy areas that we have time to clean up now in the fall? What can we do to reduce that influx? So for every grower, they've got the list of interventions that have worked the best over time, over history, different chemistries with different registrations. I think it's important to ask, like, how are they doing now? Because a lot of what we're hearing in the last couple of years is that the sprays that we used to use for spider mites, no longer. There's just a pest resurgence after those sprays. What did we use for thrips? Oof, no longer working. So people are spending more and more on chemistries that are working more and more poorly. So, if you're not already there with this decision-making process, that's a good thing to evaluate is what's in that chemistry budget? How much has that gone up over the last few years? And do some of these different alternatives work together to give us adequate or even superior control to what we've been doing conventionally for, so many years? So, I do want to mention that there's, trapping insects, we're scouting, but we're also doing mass trapping. Now, somebody like putting up like these big long strips of yellow sticky tape, these are great. A lot of people just don't want them in their greenhouse because they're just like, they're a mess and we're going to bump into them and they're hard to put up and they're a mess to take down. But this can be actually really helpful for mass trapping especially if you've got like you're propagating and you have zero tolerance and you cannot afford to have thrips in there. You need to know exactly what's going on, and you need to know that you can trap as many as possible so that they do not vector viruses or other problems into that next round of cuttings and propagation. So these sticky traps are used for mass trapping of mostly fungus gnats, but also shorefly and definitely thrips. But they also give you a really good indication, and I don't worry about it too much, but some beneficials get stuck on them. So might have some of those. I mentioned hunter flies earlier. They're an introduction from Europe, but they're little tiny, they look like little house flies. They're about a quarter of an inch long, and they will be flying through the crop and sometimes get stuck on these, but they're actually hunting, and they're hunting for whitefly. They're hunting for things like leafhopper, anything that moves, and they're very cool. If you want to learn more about those, let me know. But those are some of the things that we see on the sticky cards. Certainly, sticky trapping is not used in mass in, say, poinsettia production, but certainly if you're a poinsettia grower, you have lots of yellow sticky cards out for whitefly. So how is all this stuff communicated? I was at a great nursery about a month ago up in Canada for the IPPS people, plant propagators. What a great group. If you're not a member of that group, I would so strongly advise getting involved, and you're going to hear from me. Fantastic, just to re-meet some of these Canadians and see some of what they're doing up there. I think this was at Van Bell, big woody producers up there. Gorgeous, gorgeous greenhouse ranges. What they had going on here is you could see this giant whiteboard, and they had it all delineated with the zones of all the greenhouses. And then they had stacks of these magnets with these like really fun illustrations of the 5 or 6 major pests plus weeds, and then the treatment. So there's a stack of magnets there. So when somebody in zone 9B sees mealybug, she's gonna put a magnet there. Now this is all like right next to the break room and the bathroom and the offices, and people are coming and going on bicycles through this big range. They may or may not have like a hand lens with them. They're noticing things just by eye. They're in there working the crop. So, you want those eyes on everything and giving feedback. Again, even if they don't know what the problem is, mark it with something. And that, helps send the head grower or the IPM manager back into the system, and then to determine an action item. What's that going to be? Oh, well, we already have some biocontrols out there. Okay, well, we just released one batch. We'll put a magnet there just to let the grower in that area know that, yep, we're on track. The beneficial insects are working, and this is what you're seeing. So that's just a great tool. I just was so impressed by that. And everybody's got a different way of communicating, and really our success, with this whole idea of biological control is really going to be dependent upon our actions today. We all know about the tenets of IPM, sanitation, cultural practices, hygiene, keeping a really clean space, working from crop to crop, taking that time to invest in the scouting and the communication, and not just for pests, but disease. And keep in mind that a lot of these pests will be vectoring disease, especially thrips, but also aphids and some of these leaf hoppers can be bad news. So it's super important that we're in there early and picking up on this stuff. We have some great opportunities to produce and generate habitat. And I really want to encourage you, if you haven't been able to get buy-in with your organization, to consider that this is a great time of year to consider, planting some of this stuff, working the perimeter of your nursery, thinking about what you might be able to plant out there that would create like a hedgerow and basically start a farmscape. And I've got lots of information I'd be more than happy to share with you on that topic. But going along with all this, I want you to just understand it's a whole system. So being proactive, taking care of all these baseline management issues, and then deciding how you're going to come in there. What kind of new technology and what kind of combination between these new technologies are we going to employ in this particular situation? So I threw in a drone shot here because I think this is a great way to go for some of the larger woody nurseries. The grower above is holding buckwheat hulls, which actually are containing cryptolamus, which is a mealybug predator. So this is what they're doing over wine grapes. We could do a whole hour on wine grapes. That would be fun. But what I wanted to segue into is just this idea that, we've mentioned a bit about the microbial myco insecticides, right? So we've all heard of Botanigard, and there's a bunch more really amazing materials that have been introduced over the last 30 years now. But I think our blinders have been on because we haven't had the science to really truly understand what some of these other characteristics and qualities are of the beneficial microbes, both bacterium but also fungi. So we think that we think we know a lot. We know so little, but we're learning every day. We have known. I remember reading papers back in the 90s talking about bacterium and how the bacterium can actually translocate and be systemically, like, and symbiotically um, basically taken up by the plant. And so that you can actually have symbiotic relationships within the plant where the bacterium is giving off certain like secondary metabolites, so enzymatic byproducts. They've finally found that fungi is capable of this too. For many years, we thought, well, beneficial fungi in the soil, yeah, that makes sense. We know that they can associate around the root hair, and that this is definitely where we see most of the activity at its most obvious. What researchers are finding now is that as inoculums in the young part, like in a liner or woody nursery, or as a seed coat, um, these these fungi that are, you know, being specifically now discovered and cultivated in labs, will actually move systemically through the plant, colonize that plant all the way through the system. So this is happening now. There's a group down in the Carolinas, JAB of the Carolinas, and they're registering this as basically an inoculum. They're not registering it as a biopesticide yet. But that's going to be next, and you'll see inoculums like this popping out on the market. If you'd like to learn more, just please reach out. But the idea here is that we set off these systemic relationships within the plant that could actually help repel insects and help with pathogens. So not only helping in the root system, but moving all the way through the plant. So the microbiome of the plant itself is actually pretty fascinating, crazy complicated. And the more we know, the less we know. Gosh, just last night, I uncovered some white papers. I was looking for some sort of image like this, which I borrowed from a study. If you'd like to read more, let me know, and I'd be happy to send you some of this information about just more on the endophytic fungi that are doing this. So they have just these mutualistic relationships and associations. So as they enter the root system, these activities are both direct and indirect, these actions, but they can benefit plant health in so many ways. And I don't want to sound glib, you know, like plant health. But these are real things that are going on with the microorganisms. So the fascinating thing about these fungi is they actually will colonize the intercellular and intracellular spaces within the plant. And we've shown that these fungi, the ones that work, like for instance in wheat, can actually, one application can colonize that wheat, the fall planting wheat, all the way into harvest time next May or June. So it's absolutely fascinating because the secondary metabolites that they're whomping out there are acting to you know, ward off pests, ward off pathogens, increase yield, and the yield per acre, everything's going up, up, up. Now, that's not to say that these things are going to be one particular, say, Beauveria bassiana that they have found to do really well in wheat and grains is going to do exactly the same thing on your arbutus out there in the can yard. But what I'm trying to share is that this is changing really quick. And if you are interested in doing any trials, there's all sorts of opportunity. We have 8 trials going on right now, just starting up to look at different crop systems, from tropicals to cannabis to lavender right now, and on and on. So if you're curious, you know, keep the chatter going, start doing some research. I'll send you a bunch of stuff. But they do so much. So we just don't know if they're going to do different things on different plants, which is that's pretty clear. But what we've found so far is that the increase, like in yield in wheat, is pretty incredible. So at a 1% inoculum rate, which is like 1 ounce per acre, they can do that for less than $20 an acre. And if this is an adjunct to a system and it's that basically inexpensive to do, why not? I'd really like to see some good trials go on next year. Anyway, there's just all sorts of benefits and opportunities, and I just don't want to dwell too long on that because there's so much else to talk about. So, you know, you've got these things that are just like they're new, they're really interesting, they're worth trying. You know, you may be at a whole nother level and just starting to experiment with biological, you know, controls. If you are and you wanted and you're in even like a retail nursery situation, think about what is already there and what's free. Um, what I'm finding fascinating is that there's all sorts of research that just seems to have been buried and forgotten. And I think out of desperation with registration of pesticides and things that aren't working anymore, it's been fascinating, especially Dr. James, David James over at WSU. He's in Prosser on the other side. He's done a lot with like great mealybug, and he's got some great studies if you want to look at them. But what they're finding, for instance, and that's just one crop, but this is transfers to multiple crop systems. When you start using methyl salicylate lures and drawing in naturally occurring beneficials, you are going to be actually 3 steps forward in combating, mealybug, whitefly, thrips, because you have natives out there willing to go to work for you. So it is a plant signaling compound. So it's just attracting predators from an array of locations. So it's a very neglected tool. So I just wanted to mention that. Controlled releases alone just really increase the recruitment and residency. And here's a list of just a few of the insects that you can attract. So say you just released a bunch of lacewing, maybe lacewing larvae even into a system, because those are, inexpensive and commercially available, like the aureus. You've got them out in the system, but you want to recruit them to stay. And maybe you're adding some of these alternate food resources like pollen that could be mixed in, or you have some nice nectar producing plants. All of that's going to help. Something like the mesa lures could actually take you another step down that road, bringing in the real freebies like the syrphid and hoverflies for aphid control. So not to be overlooked anymore. I'm tired of this getting brushed under the rug, because I just think it's almost like a no-brainer, especially if you're out in hoop houses and more open field situations. So yeah. Anyway, read a little bit more about those, because aphid control is such a big deal, and it's really a matter of what crop are you in, which types of aphids do you have. There again is our little aphid mummy to show you that. And if you do have those syrphid and hoverflies moving into the system, you can see that here's the larvae of one. It looks just like a little kind of a bald caterpillar crawling along the leaf. But these are much like those little midge larvae, which are just kind of disgusting, like little maggots, but they go along and they bite, and they inject a toxin to kind of immobilize the insect, the aphid, and just suck them dry. And you've got to have multiple tactics when you're dealing with aphids. You can draw in the freebies, invite the natives, release the parasitic wasps, and the green lacewings, hopefully. Um, but beware and be ahead, because as you can see in the top corner, you know, aphids are giving live birth. Every moment they're just squirting out live babies. So this parthenogenesis is it's pretty horrendous, because you can blink, and where you thought you had maybe a little hot spot, which you just detected on Friday afternoon, and come back into your greenhouses, and Monday morning you're in trouble, and you may have to do some spot sprays to knock down in that area, as you're waiting for the beneficial insects to catch up. So you got to get ahead and stay ahead, and not pause when it comes to keeping the damper on things. So a multi-pronged approach is really imperative when it comes to aphids. And that's where some of these other mycopesticides come in. So here's here's an aphid, a winged aphid, which has been infected by Beauveria bassiana. So again, this is an endopathic fungi, which is just used as a foliar in most cases, but great to attack aphids, whether winged or just crawling around. So there's a lot of products with these ingredients in them now, and they can work really well in tandem with a beneficial insect program where you're doing releases. So what's amazing about the Beauveria bassiana and some of the other fungi, Isara and Metarhizium, is that, they go out and the spore is ready to germinate. It's a blastospore that is ready to just like pop and germinate like a seed. So under nice ripe conditions of high humidity, so 60% and above, um, and especially, in temperatures between like 64 and 85, in a in a moist area, and especially with like a little, like on a cloudy day is perfect. These spore will germinate really quickly. And so as the insect walks over them, if they haven't already been sprayed by them, it germinates and it finds its way into an orifice of any sort, and works its way in and basically starts to eat the insect from the inside out. So once it's devoured the insect, if conditions are still ripe and you have high humidity, then it will actually like sporulate like you see in this picture. Most of the time, you don't actually see fuzzy aphids with sporulation over their bodies, but it is kind of neat to see, and under certain conditions, you'll see that. So, again, mixing all these things together, finding the right blend of things that work for you, and then thinking about like the size of your nursery and the setting and the orientation and even the wind direction. All of these things will help you determine whether it makes sense or where it might make sense to build more habitat outside. Um, you can do this so many different ways. So hedgerows, farmscaping. Gosh, go to our website and look under resources and find the ATTRA publication, ATTRA. So it's farmscaping for beneficials. And it's a fantastic document that will help you think about, okay, well, I've got these pests for the most part. So if I plant X and Y, oh, composites, plants from the composite family, plants from the Labiate family. Um, if I do this and that, and I even have, I've had a chance to build a hedgerow with these tall shrubs that are also flowering, I can create habitat, but also a windbreak. I can stop that influx of thrips from that hayfield next door. So think about, the dynamics of your particular system, and think about like if there is a place to do things like banker plants within your operation, or sanctuary plants that would create pollen and nectar, right between your cash crops, for the aureus, the minute pirate bug. Um, if you can plant alyssum and invite in hover and syrphid flies, there's so much that you can do that are very like simple methods to employ the natives, and certainly we're here to help you along the way. So much to say about this. I put in this funny picture of the inset of the big IBC tote, because there's some really large nurseries, like Monrovia, who have gone in and like, okay, well, we have forklifts, we have spent soil from these dumped pots. Let's cut off the top of these IBC totes, put these Hummers like on pallets if we need to, fill them with soil, and plant them with things like our agastache and composites and echinacea and coreopsis. Um, so that way we've got basically like a mobile insectary. So we can release beneficial insects onto it. We can also attract the wild ones to it, and from there, we can move them wherever we might want to around the nursery as you move through different crop systems. The IBC tote like that would actually also be low enough that you could reach in and you could exchange and refresh plants as needed. So I thought that was a really great idea. I know the nurseries are just getting like bigger and more monocroppy, I guess, in some ways. So, you really have to think about what you need where, and and what's really going to be there for you. But I want you to keep in mind that, the native beneficials will appear. So the less spraying you can do, the more they're actually just going to come and find you. So the releasing then of the beneficial insects that you might have to purchase or bring in, you really want to do that on the front end of the crop. You may be nervous about doing it too early, like it's too cold, and do I want to really be that far ahead of the pest? Those are things that you need to think about when you think about what type of pest it is. So maybe that on this crop you're going to have spider mites. They've overwintered, but they're really not going to start causing damage until whatever, things in that hoop house warm above 50 degrees. And those plants start growing again. So that 50-degree Fahrenheit temperature is kind of, it's that sweet spot where everything starts to rumble and roll. So as the pest mites that were maybe down in some of that foliar debris or just hanging out, chilling, as they start rummaging around again, it's really nice to have a predator mite that we know can do the same. So there's one predator mite, for instance, I really like, and it's called Amblesius phallacis. And phallacis mite is hardy, it's native, it winters over, so it will just hang out down there at the soil level, just waiting for those temperatures to broach 50 degrees. So when things start rumbling around again and the spider mite starts to get active, phallacis is right there. Plus, they'll eat the eggs. Another early season predator mite is cucumerus, which can take really cold temperatures and actually be a great food resource for some of the other beneficial mites. But it's waiting for, early thrips to hatch, but it'll also eat a few, say, spider mite eggs that have wintered over. So thinking about, how early your problems are going to rear their heads, and then working with somebody that can help you determine, like, what kind of a head start can I get, is really important to the planning process. Keep thinking about opportunities for habitat, and reach out and find, pals. Collaborate with your peers, the pros, people out there in the industry. Keep going to conferences. Try to align yourself and your whole team with all the support that they need to make really good decisions. I hope you have a really great, quiet season and don't work too hard.